Hi, everybody. I see attendees starting to join little by little. As people are filtering in, I just want to say hello. My name is Sidney, and I'm a housing advocacy organizer with NLIHC. Just a reminder for folks, especially for new people who might be joining us for the first time, we are recording this session and it will be put on YouTube afterwards. But just so everyone's aware that it'll be recorded. And we'll be starting momentarily. But in the meantime, if you all want to drop in the chat where you're joining us from. All right, let's see. We have Patricia here from the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. We have Kyle from Philly, an old NLIHC alum who just recently left about 2-3 months ago to go to grad school, but he's staying in the housing world. And then we have Mike D from Lake Forest Park. And then Kyle saying, go Sidney. We have Gianna from Child Care Law Center in Berkeley, California. We have Maria from NPLS LA Area, Pennsylvania. And we have Paula from Project Infinity Incorporated in Atlanta, Georgia. And then I'm so sorry if I mispronounce this, Shahida, Georgia nonprofit. We also have John from Philadelphia. We have Jerry joining us from Chicago. We have Susan joining us from Downtown Women's Center in Los Angeles. Theodore also from Los Angeles. And then for the new folks that are joining us right now, just a reminder that we are recording this session. We'll be starting in just a few minutes, but if you want to drop where you're joining us from in the chat, please feel free to. Cool. All right, so we have Annalie from Fresno, California with EAH Housing. We have Rose from School Health Clinic of Santa Clara. We have Linda with Freedom from the Street. Douglas Club of Austin, we have Kirsten joining us from there. And then Joey from NLIHC is joining us from Faribault. We also have another Chicago fellow Chicagoan, I don't know how to pronounce, like another fellow person from Chicago, but Nitu, who's also on NLIHC staff. Then we have Maria from Madison. And thank you, Paula. I hope I did a good job. And then we have Emma Foley joining us from Durham, North Carolina, which she's also on NLIHC staff. And we have Courtney as well from DC, also on NLIHC staff. Linda acknowledging that Joey's back. He came back, I think, about a week and a half ago. Time goes by so fast here. It's hard to remember sometimes. And then we have Trisha joining us from the Burning Book Club in DC via Stone Mountain, Georgia. We have Nakia from Houston, Texas, the National Public Housing Museum Advisory Board and Work Group, and a resident co-op in partnership and supported by NPHM. Very involved. I'd definitely love to learn more about that. And Joey, they're saying that he's traveling back to DC. Catherine is joining us from Washington State, and Laura Ramos joining us from Accessible Community Housing Roles in New Jersey. Well, as people are filtering in, we'll continue to let folks tell us where they're joining us from in the chat, but I'll go ahead and get started. Awesome. Okay. So again, hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. So today we'll be discussing some resources available for renters who are interested in becoming homeowners, as it said in a lot of the e-blasts that we sent out and some of the posts that we shared on Facebook. And I also want to kind of put out the disclaimer that this Tenant Talk Live specifically will be discussing PHA homeownership And we're also very happy to discuss any other aspects of homeownership in future Tenant Talk lives. But if there is something of particular interest to you, I know a few folks reached out to me about specific aspects of homeownership before this, like feel free to email me and we can definitely explore those ideas for future sessions. But with that being said, NLIHC, as many of you know, kind of focuses on making rent affordable to the lowest income renters, but we did recognize like the importance of holding a space for you all to discuss like why becoming a homeowner might be so difficult and explore like any existing resources for folks and programs that reduce barriers to homeownership for low income renters. So I did also want to share with you all a report that was written by the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance that was actually we have two folks joining us today that will be speaking on behalf of the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. And if you want to read more about PHA homeownership in general, we'll drop that link in the chat for you all so that you can read that report in a little bit more detail, but that it'll go in depth in terms of like what we'll be speaking about today. And I also wanted to share with you all the Harvard's Joint Center for Housing Studies most recent State of the Nation's Housing Report, which is a report that they put out every year that kind of highlights a lot of different patterns or like things that are going on in terms of homeownership at the federal level. So including some of the key findings that came out of this year, such as increased housing prices and increased demand for housing with a limited amount of housing this year. And I definitely encourage y'all to check that out. It definitely, oh, PHA, thank you, Esther. That is a good question. So those are public housing authorities. Thank you for asking that. I'm sure other folks had that question. And if there's any acronyms that come up, folks, please feel free to ask me because sometimes I'll forget that it'll just like go over my head. So thank you. But Courtney did go ahead and share those resources with you in the chat. Thank you, Courtney. And hopefully that updated link will work for you all. If not, I can definitely follow up in the follow-up email afterwards with the correct links. So before introducing our amazing panel for today, I did want to just go over a few reminders. So if you have any questions for the folks that will be speaking today, please make sure to use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. And then feel free to engage in any conversation through the chat feature. And with that, I'll go ahead and introduce some of our NLIHC staff to provide some updates for y'all. So we will be beginning with Kim Johnson, who is our policy analyst, and she will be providing some policy updates from the Hill and other miscellaneous policy things.
Miscellaneous policy things are my specialty, so thank you for hitting on that. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Always happy to be here with you all. I'm Kim Johnson. I'm a policy analyst with NLIHC, and I'm here to bring you a rundown of what's happening on Capitol Hill. So the big news of the last week is the landmark reconciliation package that was released last week and proposes investing more than $330 billion in affordable housing as part of that $3.5 trillion recovery package, or reconciliation package rather. So the bill included funding for all of NLIHC's housed campaign priorities, and that includes $90 billion for new rental assistance, $80 billion to preserve and make much needed repairs to public housing, and $37 billion for the National Housing Trust Fund to construct deeply affordable, accessible housing for people with the lowest incomes. Additionally, the bill provides billions of dollars to the Home Investments Partnership Program, the Housing Investment Fund, Community Development Block Grants, the Community Restoration and Revitalization Fund, which includes a $500 million set aside for community land trusts and shared equity homeownership. The bill would also provide much needed funding for energy efficient and climate resilient upgrades in existing HUD housing stock, assistance to revitalize distressed HUD properties, funds for tribal housing, as well as housing for older adults, and people living with disabilities, and money to support fair housing activities and down payment assistance for first-generation home buyers. The House Financial Services Committee is in the process of marking up this bill right now as we speak, which is unfortunately one of the reasons I have to motor once I'm done talking so I can keep watching that. And the committee will vote on the legislation as soon as tonight, possibly tomorrow, depending on how long markup goes. And once it passes out of committee, it will be combined with the other pieces of the bill that are making their way through their respective committees into that one giant $3.5 trillion package. So right now we need to keep the pressure on Democratic members of Congress to follow through with their commitment to enact this package, which offers a once in a generation opportunity to make the major investments in affordable, accessible housing that we really need in order to combat the nation's affordable housing crisis. West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin has already publicly declared that he would not support spending a $3.5 trillion package. So there is a lot of work that lies ahead to ensure that these funding levels are protected and that Congress recognizes the vital importance of enacting this bill. So we're asking advocates to call and weigh in with their members of Congress about the necessity of these funds and to demand their members provide the highest level of funding possible for affordable housing programs, and particularly the investments in housing vouchers, public housing, and the National Housing Trust Fund that I mentioned earlier. You can find the contact information for your members of Congress at this link that I'm about to, oh wait, it's already there, great job. So Courtney already dropped the link in the chat where you can contact your members of Congress. You can also go to gov.us if that's any easier. And that's about it for me. I'm happy to answer any questions and I will turn it back over to you, Sidney.
Thank you, Kim. It doesn't seem like we have any questions regarding, but I don't think any questions have come in just yet. Oh, actually, we did just have one come in from Nakia, but I don't know if it's in relation to what you were just speaking about, but it was talking about a feedback loop for repairs. I think we can probably address that one later. I'm not sure if that one.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Sorry, my mic is all messed up, so I can't tell if I.
No, it's okay.
That's a really interesting question, and you know, it's important that people are or HUD is soliciting feedback from actual, you know, tenants of assisted housing in order to get the information they need about the repairs that are being needed, that are needed. So I will check in on what the feedback loop for repairs will look like. I don't think we have enough details exactly on those kind of mechanisms quite yet, but I will be sure to let folks know once we do have that information.
Awesome. And then we have a question from Chris that says, do we know, well, he had two questions. So the first one is, do we know when mortgage assistance for homeowners will be available for folks to apply?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I see that Joey is potentially writing an answer now. I'm actually not sure. That all kind of depends on when it would get enacted, this reconciliation bill. So that would really, the answer of like when those funds would be available is really very much up in the air.
Thank you, Kim. And then there was also another question from Chris that said, how will the states access the National Housing Trust Fund resources or cities if funded?
Yeah, another great question. So you would have to go through the organization that is already allocating those National Housing Trust Fund resources. I can pop a link to our NHTF implementation guide in the chat, which might help answer some of those questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. And then we had another good question come in too, but how will the money be dispersed and monitored to ensure that the services directly make a positive impact for the people and real affordable housing?
Yeah, another great question. It's vitally important that that funding goes out to folks who need it and that we're ensuring that they're distributed with equity in mind. And so I think that a lot of it is going to come down to both federal, state, and local governments implementing and advocates ensuring that those funds get to the people who need it the most. And so it's going to take a lot of collective action in order to ensure that funding is going where it's needed. And we'll also be working with HUD, I'm sure, once hopefully, fingers crossed, this bill gets enacted, to ensure that those funds are being distributed in an efficient and equitable way.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. I think that was the last question that came in, but if there's anything that folks have questions about, feel free to email me at the end and I can definitely forward those to Kim. Awesome. All right, so now I'll go ahead and introduce Emma Foley, who is a research analyst with NLIHC, and she will be giving us some emergency rental assistant updates.
Great, thank you, Sidney. Like Sidney said, my name is Emma. Happy to be here and so great to be with you all this evening. So today I just wanted to provide a brief update on the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. Some of this information is a little newer and some is less new, but I just wanted to provide it in case anyone wasn't on the last call. So first, NLIHC is continuing to track around 500 state, local, and tribal government emergency rental assistance programs across the country. And before I go any further, I prepared a chat with lots of links that I'll go ahead and send. And so those 500 programs, we have a searchable lookup tool for people to find programs near them, which is the first link in the chat. So if you or someone you know is in need of rental assistance from COVID hardship, then feel free to take a look at that link. You just type in the city or state and it filters down the results. We've also been tracking the pace of emergency rental assistance spending. And unfortunately, ERA funding for many programs has been getting out much too slowly. And it's really imperative that programs speed up their pace of distribution since the federal eviction moratorium is no longer in effect. The U.S. Department of Treasury released updated emergency rental assistance spending data through July 31st, revealing that in July, an additional $1.68 billion had been spent. However, this was only slightly more than what was spent in June. This brought the total amount of emergency rental assistance paid as of July to $5.2 billion, which is only about 20% of the initial $25 billion ERA1 allocation. And then there's also the additional about $21.6 billion in ERA2. NLIHC is also tracking spending on our dashboard, which is a link in the chat as well. And in some good news, in the last month, several states have significantly increased their pace of distribution. This includes New York, which had distributed 0% of their funding as of July 31st, but has now sent out more than $300 million. We also have more in-depth tracking where you can see how your state compares to others, which is linked out from the dashboard. Lastly, I just wanted to talk about the reach and the need for ERA funding. So the Treasury data revealed that at least 2.3 million households had applied for emergency rental assistance, but that by the end of July, less than half of those had received assistance. These numbers confirm that backlogs in application processing are likely slowing down the dispersal of ERA funding. The 2.3 million households that have applied for assistance is also much less, forgive my cat jumping in the background, is also much less than the estimated 6.5 million households that are behind on rent, which points to the continued need for robust emergency rental assistance outreach efforts. If you are interested in advocating for program improvements to your local or state ERA program, oh my gosh, NLIHC also houses ERA checklists that list how programs can become more efficient and equitable. And those checklists are also posted in the chat. That's all I have for today, but it looks like there's potentially some questions. Happy to answer any questions, and I'll stick around to answer anything that comes up in the chat.
Thank you, Emma. So I think the first question that we have here is from Paula, and I saw a few comments in the chat as well. So Paula asked, is anyone tracking if there are any renters moving from renter unfriendly states to friendlier states where ERA funds are getting out?
That's a really good question. You know, I'm not sure of the answer to that specifically. Emergency rental assistance funds can be used for relocation, you know, like within a state. So if a state has a program, they might be able to pay for a renter household to move, for example, if their landlord is hostile or has threatened eviction. But I'm not sure about in terms of across state lines. But that's definitely something we can keep an eye out for.
Yeah, no, definitely. I thought that was also a very good question. So thank you, Paula. And then Laura Ramos did join us today, and I believe Kim answered her question, but she did follow up with a comment saying that the Second Rescue Act funding allows those who have been directly or not directly COVID financially disadvantaged during the pandemic to apply for ERA funds, but in New Jersey, there doesn't seem to be a way to do it unless you are directly COVID affected or you are behind on your rent. And that just made me think about some other cases that we've also heard about how folks with ERA applying for ERA need to like show proof that they were impacted by COVID, or in any like advocacy tools that we're using, I guess, in terms of trying to provide Treasury any guidance in terms of self-attestation and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I would just say one other thing, that's a really good point, that ERA2 is a household doesn't have to be financially impacted due to COVID, but just during COVID. And I'm not positive about New Jersey, but a lot of places still haven't tapped into their ERA2 funds, so they might only be posting regulations related to their ERA1 funds. And so it's definitely worth continuing to check and potentially reaching out to, if like programs have call centers, because unfortunately the programs are constantly changing. And so that is a really good point.
Awesome, thank you. And then we had another question from Melissa. Melissa said, thank you for the information. How can we help with pace and reach? And I think this is just in terms of disbursement of funds.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think I'm going to post one of the links again, but we have a list of or an ERA checklist that has kind of different categories of how programs can be effective. And a lot of programs have implemented different flexibilities or tenant protections, but a lot still have not. And so if you're aware of, you know, your state or local emergency rental assistance program and want to be in communication with them, you can advocate to, you know, either your local government or state government to implement those program flexibilities and also tenant protections, like pairing emergency rental assistance with eviction diversion programs, for example. But I'm gonna paste that link separately in the chats because it's buried in one of the ones I sent already.
Awesome, thank you, Emma. And we do have a few more questions in the chat. I don't know if you'll have time to answer them through the chat if possible. And I know Laura Ramos also had another question about the requirements for definitions of accessibilities or measures of accessibility to be updated in order to meet people's needs or disability needs in their housing. And I think that brings up a really excellent point. I know today we're probably talking about homeownership, but Laura, I just want you to know that you're being heard and that we are listening to the things that you're mentioning today. And as I'm sure you know, Laura, our next Tenant Talk publication will be on the intersection between like disability justice and housing. And our hope is to eventually actually have a Tenant Talk live where we can talk about these issues live as well. So if we're not able to answer that question today, I'm hoping to get to it in the future, but I do want you to know that I'm not dismissing your question for right now, because I do see it as something that is important.
Can I just pop in real quick?
Yeah, of course, of course.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I do want to plug that actually Laura is featured in our next Tenant Talk, which is very exciting. So
yes.
she designed a beautiful picture that we're going to be featuring on the cover, and then she shared her story with us, as well as some tips for advocacy, and so so it will be great to, I'm glad we're able to feature that. Sorry. But yeah, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, just wanted to plug that.
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Tori. And for the other questions that were asked, the ERA checklist is really meant to kind of help out with advocating for better ERA programs, so definitely check those out. And I know Linda left a comment saying that all topics are tenant worthy, and yes, they are. So hopefully we'll be able to get through a lot of the ones that you all ask for in the future. Okay, so with that being said, we'll go ahead and move on to our panelists for today. So we will be joined by Patricia Fron and Jerry Johnson, both who are representing the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. Patricia as a co-executive director and Jerry Johnson as a member of CAFHA's Housing Choice Voucher Leader Board. I do love for folks to introduce themselves and provide their own spiel about themselves. So if you all can introduce yourselves and then go ahead and give your presentation.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting us today. I'm with the Chicago Area Fair Housing Alliance. We are an advocacy organization centered on dismantling our region's history of residential segregation and the wealth stripping that we've seen in communities of color in the Chicago area. I'm going to talk very briefly about a recent report we released on Public Housing Authority homeownership programs, and then kick it over to my co-presenter, Jerry Johnson, to talk about his experience with the homeownership program as well. So in June, CAFHA released a report titled Public Housing Authority Homeownership Programs, Scaling Up a Powerful Yet Underutilized Tool to Restore Wealth Building Opportunities. I saw in the chat that maybe there was some issues with, sorry, did not mean to do that. Maybe there were some issues with accessing the report. So I'm dropping the link again in the chat. And just a very brief background of how we got to this report. We conducted extensive research. We talked with close to 450 voucher holders in Cook County, either through direct one-on-one interviews or through surveys. And what we found is that the vast majority of the voucher holders that we engaged with strongly desired the opportunity to become homeowners. One key takeaway being that for voucher holders, this is not just about growing wealth, although we do have to note that growing wealth through homeownership is a big deal because homeownership is the primary way through which your average household in the United States can grow wealth. But for the folks we talked with, it was so much more than that. This is about shifting power. This is about gaining control over the decisions that impact their lives, because for many voucher holders, at least here in the Chicago area, homeownership meant freedom from the worry of having to move from place to place, often at the whim of a landlord, from dealing with the stigma that's so often attached to having a rental voucher, and to have the ability simply to make their house a home for themselves. But despite all of these opportunities and this strong desire, there are major barriers for voucher holders to even participate in this program. The U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development allows local public housing authorities to create homeownership programs, which basically shift the tenant-based voucher that helps pay a portion of one's rent each month to a homeownership voucher that can pay either a down payment or a portion of one's mortgage cost each month. Although HUD allows this, these programs are across the board underinvested in, they're underutilized. And if we look at the Chicago Housing Authority as an example, which outperforms many housing authorities across the country, we've seen about 680 households that have purchased in the roughly 20 years the CHA has had this program, which is an average of only 34 families per year. This is less than 0.001% of the CHA's overall participant pool, which to us is really a drop in the bucket. In our report, we analyze the barriers to program participation. We offer a series of recommendations aimed at HUD, housing authorities, and the lending and real estate industry, really to scale up these programs to meet the desires of voucher holders. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Jerry to talk about his experiences with homeownership, why he entered the program, what homeownership means to him, and what challenges he's faced on his road to homeownership.
And thank you, Patricia. My name is Jerry Johnson. I'm a member of the CAFHA Leadership Board as well as a voucher holder, right? The purpose of me joining, signing up for the CTO was it presented an opportunity for someone who has a voucher to own their own home. And the process has been very, what can I say? It's been to the point where, there's ups and downs, right? I'm in the process now of trying for my third home, but the program offers so much more for voucher holders who choose to own their own home, because it gives you an opportunity to not only own your own home, but a chance to allow yourself to have something to leave to your children or grandchildren, So my purpose in buying it, because I'll be 60 in a few days. So, I have more days behind me than I do ahead of me. So my purpose was just to demonstrate to my children and my grandchildren that home ownership is something that can be achieved even in the most difficult of circumstances. And so I'm in the process now purchasing a home. The program has been beneficial, but my only concern about the program with the CTO with Chicago is the under advertisement. Very few people know about this program that are voucher holders. There are thousands of voucher holders that would probably enjoy this opportunity if given the chance, but because of a lack of knowledge of it, the participation is small. So I would just say that it is a great program to be involved in if you have the patience and you have the desire to own your own home. But we need to do more to advertise to allow people to find out about these type of programs. And thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jerry. And thank you, Patricia, for sharing about your report and sharing about your experience, Jerry. So I guess we'll move into our Q&A section now. There were a few questions that came in before you started presenting that I think would relate to what you all were talking about today. The first one was from an anonymous attendee that asked, by owning in a PHA, does that include via Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher?
Yes, it's through the Section 8 Housing Choice Voucher program. So it's basically like a subset of that larger program.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And then the second question was by Theodore, and he just wanted to know that this panel is in Chicago and Theodore lives in LA, and it seems to be more of this talk in states other than California. Is it because California is too expensive for low-income home buying? I know that might not be within.
Well, I think so any housing authority across the country is allowed to have a home ownership program. They aren't required. So I think for a lot of housing authorities, their bread and butter is the rental program. They're not really going to deviate from that because it kind of takes, I think, a lot of upfront, I guess, administrative burden to like kind of get that program off the ground, have the right partnerships that you need to make it successful, and certainly to have housing stock that's affordable. I think there are creative ways to partner with entities like Community Land Trust, for example, to foster affordable options. But again, that takes a PHA that's motivated and that's kind of, out there ready to make those partnerships. And I'll let Jerry kick it over to him to talk about costs, because Chicago is known for being an affordable market. But Jerry, if you want to talk about right now how crazy it is in Chicago too.
Yeah, well, like I said, they give you a working framework for the program. And one of the things that I think that needs to be addressed is the fact that if you're disabled, the only requirement is that you have $2,000 in savings and that you have a credit score of 640. And if you're not working, you need a $3,000. I mean, if you are working, you need $3,000 and also a score of 640. But that is not what actually happens in a lot of these cases, because like in particular in my case, there was only supposed to be a few $1,000s. But when you get into the process of constantly going to different houses and the market is changing and you're outbid, but each time you sign a contract for these houses, you have to pay for a housing inspection, and that's $300 or $400 each time. That is non-refundable, and that decreases the amount that you might have initially saved for. So I mean, there needs to be some latitude or some other available programs for, helping. With the bank that I'm going through, they give a $4,000 down payment assistance and a $500 closing cost. But my closing cost for the last property that I was going to close on was $1,800. And that didn't count the EM money, which was $1,000 that's paid up front, in addition to the $350 that was paid for the inspection that was never adhered to.
Awesome. Thank you, Jerry. Really quickly, before my colleague leaves, I know Tori wanted to ask a question if you wanted to go off mute for a second.
Sure, thanks, Sidney. Hi, I'll put my camera on. Jerry, thanks so much for sharing your experience. I really appreciate it. You did mention there were some ups and downs. I don't know how comfortable you are sharing what those are, but if you are comfortable, it would be great to maybe hear some of the ups at least that you've experienced in the program.
Well, some of the ups I've experienced is, the first one is the opportunity to become a homeowner. That is the biggest up, because there are very few opportunities for people to own a home with such a small amount. I mean, it might seem like a small amount to a lot of people, which in actuality, it's not a great big amount of money, right? But for a person who's on a fixed income or who doesn't have $100,000 a year job, it can be a difficult ladder to climb. But because of the programs that CHA offer, it gives you an opportunity to do that. But I think my biggest thing is that I am really looking forward to saying that I own my own home, and the opportunity to say that. And the biggest part about that is CHA's commitment to provide these payments for either 15 to 30 years, for you, depending on if you're disabled, it's a 30-year guarantee. And if you're working, it's 15. So that alleviates a lot of the stress right there. The fact that they will assist you for this amount of years is the biggest up there is for me.
That's great to know about that. And also, can you talk a little bit about the savings part? Did you have support in that process? And how were you able to go about doing that? Were there any caps on how much you could save, that kind of stuff?
The savings part, well, actually, I learned about the program about 2.5 years ago. I was serving on a board at CHA, an advisory board at CHA, and that's when I initially found out about it. And at the time, it was saying that you only needed $2,000, and so $2,000 if you were not working on disability, Social Security, or $3,000 if you were. So it took me like a year or something to save up that money. But once I got to that point, then I signed up for the program. But the main objective of that is that you have to continue to be able to save, even in a difficult market like this with housing market. What it is with so many people bidding for the same property, it can be frustrating at times, because you get your mind set on, yeah, this is the house for me, and then somebody outbids you. So but the savings part was a journey. But I'm grateful to the Lord that I was able to do that part.
Thanks for sharing, Jerry. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Yeah, and I'll echo what Tori just said. Thank you, Jerry. So I guess I'll just keep moving through the questions that we have in the Q&A box right now. The first one that we have is from Rose Pierre, and there's a similar one from Sharon that was in the chat earlier as well, but Rose said, I never heard of this program. Do you know if it is available in any other states like California, Section 8? And Sharon also asked if it was available in Florida.
Yeah, so it's any housing authority across the country can have a home ownership program. I should actually look. HUD, I'm sure, has a list of all of the housing authorities that have implemented a home ownership program. What we're looking to do now is on the ground advocacy with our recommendations to encourage at least our local housing authorities who do not have a home ownership program to start those home ownership programs. And we're also advocating to HUD as well to encourage all housing authorities to create home ownership programs and to also provide just better like technical assistance and resources for how housing authorities can start up these programs and the partnerships that are needed to really make them successful. So what we found, for example, locally here, I think we have like 8 housing authorities in Cook County alone, and only 2 offer the home ownership program, our 2 largest.
Thank you. And then the next question is from Chris. He's asking, aren't there shortages of HCVs in metropolitan areas such as Chicago, Boston, New York, and LA? Isn't affordable housing a major concern?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, even though, again, like we said before, Chicago is viewed as an affordable market. I don't know why. I'm always shocked when I hear that from people who don't live in Chicago, because being here, it doesn't feel affordable on the ground by any stretch of the imagination, and that's for rental housing or to purchase. But in certain neighborhoods across the county, let's say where rental units are in short supply and the market's really competitive, sometimes when you look at a breakdown of cost per month, it makes more sense to be a homeowner than it does to be a renter financially for that household. But no, we face an extreme shortage of affordable rental and owner units here, as most places across the country.
Thank you. So the next question that we have here is from Paula, and she asked for clarification. You have to already be involved with HUD to be eligible for these home ownership programs?
So every housing authority is different with how they set it up, but Jerry, correct me if I'm wrong, at least for the Chicago Housing Authority, how long do you have to be a rental voucher holder for before you can apply to the homeowner program?
Well, once you get into the housing program, you have to be there for, well, now it's only a year. It used to be 2 years. You had to be in the program at least 2 years before you could get what they would call HCV voucher, Housing Choice Voucher. But after 1 year, you're eligible for the voucher. So anytime after 1 year, you can ask to participate.
Thank you for that information, Jerry. So I guess the next question that we have is from Nakia. What incentives exist for PHAs and other stakeholders to get involved in these type of programs?
I think that's part of the problem now. There's not really any incentives to the housing authority at all. I mean, it's really more of just an offering. Like HUD says, you're allowed to start up a homeownership program, and it has to be housed within the rental voucher program under just the Housing Choice Voucher program. Under that umbrella, you can have some subset that's geared towards homeownership. But I think a lot of the problem is I feel like there's more disincentives than there are incentives, just because, there's that kind of upfront, I guess, again, administrative burden of just starting up these programs and getting partnered or allied with housing counseling agencies, HUD-approved housing counseling agencies to provide the housing counseling that HUD requires for the program, and just making sure that you have everything in place as a housing authority to properly support voucher holders through the process and then into homeownership beyond that. So that's part of what we're advocating for, is again to make the program build in more incentives for housing authorities to roll out the program.
Awesome. And thank y'all for looking into that. Okay, we have another question from Chris. Is there credit building services available to those who are interested in the program?
Yeah, so there's a requirement to go through housing counseling, and I'll let, because Jerry's closer to that than I am. If Jerry, if you want to talk about your recollection of what any like credit counseling or other supports are available to folks going through the program.
Well, I personally didn't have to go through credit counseling service because my score was already high, but I did have to take a homeowners class. But I also know that they do offer credit counseling service for those who need it through a third-party services where the CHA facilitates the services of credit counseling and all the other extra things that you might need in order to qualify for the homeowners program, because the bank requires, and HUD as well requires, that you have a certain credit score. So they take you step by step through the program of rebuilding your credit or establishing credit if you don't have any.
And just to kind of piggyback on that too, one thing that we are advocating for that came out of our work researching for this report is really a kind of peer-to-peer mentorship program. So we would love to see folks who've gone through the program being paid and compensated to be peer mentors to folks who are just coming up through the program. So someone who could really, first of all, understand the position you're in, the challenges that you face, and be able to kind of walk you through step by step and provide for a lot of those supports that are needed.
Thank you. So we have 2 more questions in the Q&A, and then I'll go ahead and answer some in the chat too, if we have time. But the first one that comes up here is from Joy Letha. I think I pronounced that right. I'm so sorry if I didn't pronounce that right. But they are asking, how do you get onto the program?
So I think it's if you're already a voucher holder, it's inquiring with your public housing authority if they have the program and what the process is to join the program. If you are not already a voucher holder, it would be again going to your local public housing authority and determining if they have the program, if you're required first to become a rental voucher participant, and figuring out the steps there. A lot of housing authorities have really lengthy wait lists, like we do here in Chicago, just to get on the rental program at all. And I know that's something at the federal level we're trying to tackle, because we really need to see universal vouchers across the board for everyone who needs them. And we're not there yet. But yeah, I think it's looking at your local housing authority where you live and seeing how you can access that program.
And hopefully it'll pass in the in the package that's going through markup right now. So the last question that we have here in the Q&A box is, what is the availability of the housing inventory for very low income families to purchase?
I think that's different in every in every locality. Even within the area that we researched, Cook County, every municipality is very different in terms of their levels of affordability and stock that's even available. So I mean, we feel like we have a shortfall, but I think there are opportunities, again, through like the community land trust, community land banks here locally. Someone mentioned, I think in the chat, which I've been having a very hard time keeping up with. I'm surprised by how many comments are coming in. But like zoning changes that are needed, we need to like remove the restrictions that just stop the supply of affordable housing. We need more parameters around the market to stem the tide of the rising rent and increases in home costs. But yeah, also, you know, there are tools that I think every jurisdiction should try to assemble every tool at their disposal to tackle this issue, because it's a huge problem here and we know it's a huge problem across the country.
Thank you, Patricia and Jerry, for answering most of the questions. I know Joey kind of went in and helped me out with answering some of the questions that I wasn't able to like see, because like you said, there's a lot coming in, but I always get very excited jumping onto this call because people get very involved and are very awesome with questions. So with that being said, I know Joey answered some of them, but I would like to go back and kind of hear some of your feedback on some of the questions that did come up. And I know, Linda, you did mention not being able to get the links. So after the call, probably sometime later this week, I will be sending out all the links that were mentioned in the chat in a follow-up email. So you'll have access to that afterwards. Speaking of Linda, she did ask, for these new owners, is there hope of program to rescue a new water heater or roof are needed and poor owners have poor financial buffers?
That's another thing that we are really working on and advocating for. It's not just about getting people into home ownership, it's, you know, sustaining home ownership for the long term. One person we interviewed had a really great example. Like, we need to treat first generation home ownership as we treat first generation college students. And being a first generation college student myself, I know, you know, how hard it was not just to get in the door, but to stay there for the 4 years successfully. So like, how do we build in all the supports to make sure that people are successful? And the maintenance cost is the biggest thing that harms people's kind of ability to stay in their home. And Jerry, I don't know, when you were going through like the orientation and the different trainings, did maintenance come up, or any like supports or resources around maintenance come up?
Well, and they told us that CHA has a program that's for its homeowners, that in case of major catastrophes, you know, such as unexpected things come up, that you could apply to those funds.
This is Joey. If I could jump in on this really quickly, I'll just say I put out a couple ideas in the chat box on this question, which I think is a really great question, which is, you know, how do we not just make low-income people homeowners, but make sure that they're successful as homeowners? And indeed, like, this question is why for very low-income people, homeownership often fails when we make it possible. So there are a couple of things that we can keep in mind. Number one is there are some federal programs that can be used for home repairs, the Community Development Block Grant specifically. But it really depends on, when that money gets to your community, what do they choose to spend it on? Because that's a program that can be spent on lots of different things. But there's also a pretty large weatherization program that is run through HUD, where home repairs can be made to reduce utility costs and sort of putting insulation and better windows and so forth. And I mentioned in the chat that those programs are usually run by community action agencies. So in a lot of places, especially rural areas where there's a lot of older homes that are falling into disrepair, being in touch with community action agencies is often a really good idea. But then I also want to flag for folks, there's a really wonderful national coalition called the Reframe Association, who we're in touch with. And the Reframe Association gathers a lot of organizations that do home repairs for low-income people through volunteer work. And so it's a common model that you might have seen in like Appalachian regions, where they were fixing up homes that were falling apart and so forth. And very often it's made available to senior citizens and so forth. But a lot of these organizations, they exist kind of nationwide. And so I'd say checking out the Reframe Association for some of these resources or home repair opportunities can be a really good way to go. And I just wanted to flag that for folks.
Awesome. Thank you, Joey. We have one question here from Esther, and I think we're probably going to have to wrap it up after that. The time goes by so quickly with all the questions, but she asked, is there help to cover future costs of home ownership?
If I can just say one thing that's really unique about this program and why, you know, we talked a lot about the barriers, but one opportunity that we see for folks who are a part of this program that other, you know, they're similarly situated peers, you know, similarly situated financially, peers do not have, is that if they face a financial setback or a job is lost or a health concern comes up, they can then, you know, with their paperwork with the housing authority can increase their monthly contribution if the household has to decrease their monthly contribution to keep the home affordable. That's just a safety net that a lot of folks don't have access to, which is really important for making homeownership possible for folks. And you know, even though maintenance issues are a huge problem, someone mentioned taxes here locally, another huge problem for us, property taxes. I think if we can figure out the formula to layer the supports the right way, having that housing authority monthly payment is really huge. And again, it's huge because you have that assurance that if you have like a rocky patch at some point, that they will be there to increase the monthly contribution. And one thing that we are also advocating for is to remove the 15-year cap on assistance for households. As Jerry mentioned, folks who are disabled or seniors, they have a 30-year time period with the homeownership voucher. For others, it's 15 years, and we'd like to see that 15-year cap be lifted so that folks will be supported through the life of their mortgage.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Patricia and Jerry. I don't know, Jerry, if you had some last minute thoughts that you also wanted to share before I close this out for the day.
No, I think it's a great opportunity because, as Patricia was saying, one of the really great things about going through this program is that if you do lose your income or for whatever reason, then CHA does pick up the slack for you, and that's included in rental. So if you're possibly paying $300 of your portion and you lose your job, then it goes to zero with CHA picking up that additional cost. So that is a blessing. Yeah, I mean, it can help sustain you in your living environment.
Thank you for sharing.
Thank you for this opportunity too.
No, yeah, thank you for being here today. Really quickly before we hop up, folks, I just want to share some other links with you as well and give you some updates on some of the things we're working on at NLIHC. But firstly, again, I just want to thank all the panelists, including those from CAFHA and NLIHC staff who came to help out today. So I guess just some external updates. NPR is looking to capture more stories about the problems renters are facing with obtaining ERA money. And so they have set up a portal to collect these stories. And if you want to share it with your network, we'll go ahead and share that link to the portal and you can share your stories there. We also have some folks who are doing research at the Poverty and Race Research Action Council to interview resident leaders about rad choice mobility for, they're creating like a guidebook for HUD essentially for rad choice mobility. So if you want to provide some feedback or have experience with rad, definitely email Brian Knutson at PRAC, and his email will be included in the chat. Courtney, I don't know if you have his email and you can share that. Thank you. And then as always, if you have any questions for me or any suggestions for upcoming Tenant Talk live topics, please email me. My email will be my first initial S and then my last name Betancourt at NLIHC.org. And we have two, I guess, marketing thingies for Tenant Talk coming up. So I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we do have the publication coming out soon. And like I said, this intersection will be talking about disability justice. And if you want to sign up for that, Courtney will be dropping that in the chat as well. And then we also have our Facebook page, which you can join. And last but not least, the most important announcement, just want to say happy birthday, Jerry. Thank you.
Thanks.
Joining us. I did want to say that. I was like, I don't know, I didn't have a chance to share that
Thank you.
before, but happy birthday. And yeah, thank you everybody for joining us today. Thank you to Patricia and Jerry for joining us from CAFHA, and I hope you all have an excellent night.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.